Hey guys, welcome to That Florida Feeling. How are you guys this week? It's been busy. Actually, that's a lie. I went on a mini vacay in Naples. But you know what? The rest of it was busy. Coming back to work, always, well, it is what it is. I'm glad that everybody has their little favorite Florida town that's, I wouldn't say overlooked, just more underrated or people haven't caught on to it yet. I got a couple votes for Venice. And then I actually heard about some cities that I had never heard of, so that was really cool. I've already added them to my list. I think it's really cool that because Florida is so diverse, the fact that the northern part is nowhere near like the southern part, that you can really just, find what you're looking for if you just drive a couple hours north or south. So that's one of the things I really, really do like about Florida. So today I'm going to do a bit of a different episode. So it's been a year, and you wonderful people still listen to me, which still surprises me so much, and I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who has reviewed, liked, followed, subscribed, joined the group, put up with the page, now see it on TikTok, and interact with Twitter. You guys are just so amazing. I'm just so overwhelmed still that somebody wants to listen to me talk for anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. I love you guys. So today I want to talk about my first year in the podcast. It's been a pretty good, interesting learning experience of a first year. I started the podcast almost as a joke. I had said that I wanted to do it, and I didn't know that I would be able to do it, and I really had no idea what I'm doing. I'm sure that if you listen to my first episodes, that's very inherently obvious. But here we are a year later, and, people still listen. So the podcast actually started just me throwing around ideas. Like, hey, I think I want to do a podcast. And then, hey, does anybody even still listen to podcasts? Hey, is this even worth doing? Because isn't there so many podcasts? And then I started listening to one of my all-time favorite podcasts, still to this day, Mystery History Podcast. And they were talking about it, and they just did it. And I thought, well, why can't I just do it? So I got some time off work. Fun fact, if you work in the school system, surprisingly, even in college, sometimes you don't have to work these summer semesters. So I got a lot of time off last year and didn't want to waste my time, and I thought I would do something creative, and so the podcast came about. And I talked to a lot of people. I had a lot of friends. Thank you to Matthew, Mary Kay, Jamie, Ree. You guys were very, very helpful in the first few episodes. Of course, can't forget my cat, who terrified me when I'm talking on the podcast, because sometimes they wanted to join in too. But all this is my big support group to tell you why I even bothered starting a podcast about Florida. And I threw around a lot of ideas. Do I want to do a mystery podcast? Do I want to do a crime podcast? Do I want to do a podcast of a woman just rambling? Which is kind of what this turns into sometimes. But I looked around, and I guess I did a little bit of research, not a lot. Don't think it took a long time. And I realized that nobody really tapped into the great potential of Florida. And there are some other really good Florida podcasts out there. Florida Men on Florida Man, huge love for these guys. They are absolutely great at what they do. They have actually been so helpful and supportive in my first year. They let me reach out to them to ask them questions that were just ridiculously stupid at times, and they answered everyone and were so nice about it. Shout out to the other podcasts that I've interacted with. Some that are still going, some that are on hiatus. Mystery History Podcast. Allison is such a wonderful human being. She was so helping and supportive as well. And so when I finally realized that I could do it, I just did it. And picked Florida. And the name came about by accident. Mary Kay, to her credit, just said, hey, what about this? And I thought, okay, I like that, because I was just clueless. I wanted to pick a fun name. I wanted to pick something that encompassed Florida. But, picking a name is harder than people think. I had, panic just picking my cats' names. And then I realized that this podcast was going to go out in social media land and the world and the internet, and it'll never come back. Once it's out there, it's out there. And so came up with That Florida Feeling. And then I knew if I did That Florida Feeling, I had to have a way to end it. And so thank you to Jamie for the Daily Dose of Sunshine part. She was very helpful in that. Her and Ree were very supportive. Always gave me really good feedback about what was going on. I appreciate them. And I did it. My first episode was Facts About Florida, because you got to know about a little bit about Florida in order to talk about it. And I wasn't going to do it. I was still like, I recorded it and I just sat there on it. And then Matthew came along and he's like, just do it. You've done it. Just do it. And so I got Anchor and it went out into the world. And that was the beginning of That Florida Feeling. And I have learned a lot about Florida. I have learned a lot about Florida I didn't know that I wanted to know. I've gotten some really cool topics. One of my favorite topics to actually research was the Florida Keys. And I had been to a couple different keys, gone diving, gone to the state parks, explored, gone to Key West, but I never really realized just how cool of a place they were, how much history they had, and how much, every time a hurricane comes, how they fight to stay alive and rebuild. And so I thought that was a really fun topic. The other topic I really got into was the Everglades. The Everglades is a really, really cool ecosystem in Florida. It's probably one of my longest episodes, and I learned a lot about it. I learned a lot about the animals, the birds, even the plants, because there's a lot of stuff that only really lives in the Everglades, and as minute as it seems, it's all really important. I think it's really cool because it's also not only is it a state park, but it's a national park. It's well protected, and it plays a very important part, especially when hurricanes come. The wildfires, and it really does just kind of take care of itself. You know, the fires happen each year to burn out the brush so that new stuff can grow, and then the hurricanes do their thing to take out what doesn't need to be there and replenish it each year, and the waterways and the canals. And so it's just a really interesting place, and I didn't realize that I would at all find it that interesting. I went in with the idea of, all right, the Everglades are well known in Florida, I guess I'll talk about them, and then I just fell in love with the area. It's such a unique, pretty, kind of scary, really cool area of Florida. And of course, the people that live there are very resilient, especially during hurricanes and just all the creatures that they live around. I do think it's fascinating that we have a swamp ape somewhere roaming around down there. Shout out to Roger for the swamp ape idea. I had forgotten that even existed. So that was a really fun episode as well, with the swamp ape and the myths about Florida, because I didn't realize that Florida had so many myths surrounding it. Jose Gasparilla. Did this man even exist? We don't know, but we celebrate him to this day. And I think that's really cool. So whether he's man or myth, he's a well-celebrated Floridian. That was just really cool to learn about. It was also really cool to learn about the fact that people thought love bugs were invented by, I think it was the University of Florida. I didn't know that. I just knew that love bugs were like the most annoying thing in the world and make all the car wash people rich during certain times of the year. So it's been really interesting and fun to learn about these things. And of course, as I'm learning about these things, I'm also experiencing parts of Florida I never thought I would. Like when I researched the abandoned Florida. I mean, of course, there are different things in Florida that are abandoned. Of course, buildings, forgotten towns. Shoot, I think Miami has at least 2 arenas that are abandoned at this point. But it was really interesting to find out that I used to live near one of them. I used to live near one of them in Fort Walton, and I drove by it every day. Every day on 98. Never had any idea that such cool history was sitting right there. And so it's been fun to go back and to think about these things. I think the other thing that I found fascinating was how much history Florida has. Yes, everybody knows St. Augustine is the oldest city in the U.S., or the oldest continuously lived in city in the U.S., And it was great because as I was doing the Florida podcast, I was living in St. Augustine, and I was able to go and visit these places I was talking about. Like when they built the fort, or they built Fort Matanzas down the river, and then the Castillo. So I could go and I could walk around these places that I had just researched and talk about, and really have a better appreciation and understanding for this ancient city. To know that, every time you dig up a street, you're probably going to find a body, because that town is literally a graveyard. To walk by a graveyard every day, because I park near it at work, and think, oh, there's probably 150 people in there, and there'd be thousands. So it was a really cool learning experience as far as that, especially because I was living there. And of course, it's haunted. And of course, I got to tell some fun ghost stories from St. Augustine, because while St. Augustine is wonderful views and amazing food, it's still, if not nothing, a ghost town. Literally a ghost town. In fact, if you ever go to A1A, on the corner of King, or no, is that King? I don't remember if that's King or not. I've just lost. No, I think it is King. Anyways, if you go down that road, it's in the Plaza de Constitution. It's by the old Trader Market. It's a bar. It's A1A. If you go to the bathrooms, you can actually look down. They still have glass plates on the floors, and you can see the tombstones beneath you. Creepy. Absolutely creepy. But very, very interesting. And it really does give you appreciation that just because you're here today in St. Augustine doesn't mean that people weren't here before you. And the people that were here before you are still here. And most of them never left for reasons or another, whether they loved the city or the city was just that mean to them. It's a very fascinating and fun place. And it was cool to be able to research it and to live there at the same time. And of course, part of Florida's history is, the hauntings. So it was cool to get to do the lighthouses. I didn't realize that Pensacola Lighthouse was so haunted. And again, living right down the road in Navarre, seeing the Pensacola Lighthouse, going there weekly, I didn't realize it was so haunted. I didn't realize that people loved it so much that they never left. And so it was really interesting to think back on experiences there and go, oh, man, it would have been cool to experience that, having been there. And things like that. And then, of course, I honestly, when I did the lighthouses, I didn't realize Florida had that many. No clue. Absolutely not. And not only do we have lighthouses, we have them in the rivers. Okay. I thought Michigan was the only place that had lighthouses weirdly spotted. But apparently not. Florida just fits in too. So that was really interesting to try to find out and to figure out and to find new places to go visit. And also, in the lighthouses, you learn more of the history. Like the lighthouse down south that was an integral part in the Seminole War, or tried to be. And they basically rebuilt it because the Seminoles gutted the inside and burned it down. And that's been another interesting thing, is to really see how the cultures were before the Spanish came in, or before, the American colonists moved south. It's been really interesting to learn about these different cultures, the Tocobaga and the Weeden Island and the Seminoles that were here long before us. And it's just been really interesting to see how they interacted with each other, and especially how they interacted with the Spanish. I love the fact that most of the western side of Florida just weren't going to have it with the Spanish. Just, we don't want to deal with you. We're not doing this. And I love that. I think it's great that they stood up for themselves and that they were going to do their own thing. So that was pretty cool. I also love the fact that the Spanish failed a couple times in Florida. They tried to make Pensacola a thing, and it didn't happen because of hurricanes, which doesn't surprise me in Florida. But, yeah, they tried to settle Pensacola before they tried to settle St. Augustine, and it just didn't work out. And so it is good to see, because you always hear of the Spanish and the colonies and the expansion and the trading, and they failed. And that's really cool because it opened the door to allow other cultures to survive. And learning about the Florida history is not just the Spanish or the Indians. You know, there's a mixed, just huge melting pot of people in this area. You know, coming over from the Panhandle, you had some French and Creole. And, of course, coming from the South, or coming from the southern U.S., before it was, you know, before Florida was a state, you had those colonists. And then, of course, the Spanish. And, you know, other people who were in the Keys, the pirates. I didn't realize that Florida was that much of a haven for pirates, especially south near, like, Marco Island and Naples. I mean, I knew the Keys. Everybody knows the Keys are full of debauchery. Pretty sure that's what they were founded on. Sorry, guys, my cats are getting in a fight, and it's over a box. But no, I didn't realize that. I mean, yes, the Keys are definitely debauchery. Still to this day. Such a fun place to visit. But I didn't realize that pirates went as far north as, like, Fernandina Beach. And, of course, we knew about Gasparilla. But Black Caesar, the other ones that dotted the Florida landscape. It was a really cool thing to learn about and to share with you guys. And it's been really entertaining to get to learn about all these fun topics. Of course, my most played episode is moving to Florida. Excuse me, guys. And what you don't realize, what you don't know to expect, and how much it's almost like its own culture shock, you know, especially depending on what part you move to. Thankfully, when we moved for the first time, we moved to the Panhandle, so Lower Alabama, still Southerners, still doing their thing, still rednecks. Like, nothing really, it didn't feel like a huge change. But then you go from, like, the Panhandle to Orlando, and it's like a whole other state. It just opens up to the Florida you think of, the interstates lined with palm trees, and alligators on the side of the road, and lakes, and people from every ethnicity in Orlando trying to make a living like you were. And it was just a really interesting culture shock. And that's just Orlando. You know, having lived up in the northern part, again, with Jacksonville and St. Augustine, that's nothing like Orlando. Jacksonville is just its whole kind of thing. There is literally nothing like Jacksonville. All I can say is I'm pretty sure that Florida man hails from around Jacksonville. Palatka, yeah. Because it's so wild to see this big city. Actually, I think it is the most,
the biggest city in Florida.
Yeah, thank you. The biggest city, Matthew's helping me on this. The biggest city in Florida, and then drive 45 minutes south, and you're in the middle of nowhere. You're in farmland. Side note, outside of Jacksonville is the only place I've ever seen a Ku Klux Klan meeting. In 2021. These are the things that Florida's sadly known for. And it still happens to this day. And then, but you go south. You go to South Florida. You know, Tampa's over here on its own island kind of thing. But you go to, like, Vero Beach. Zero Beach, but Vero Beach. And it's the wealthiest zip code probably in the U.S. almost, I would dare say, at least in Florida. And it's old money. The Tiffany's, the Vanderbilts. Thank you, Henry Flagler, for building this area up. Otherwise, there'd be nothing. And there still is kind of nothing. But there's beautiful beaches, white sand, clear waters, some really good delis. Overpriced pasta. But it really is kind of like its own place. You know, it's not like any other part of Florida. Just because it's like old money Florida. And then you go an hour south, and if you're not in the ghetto, I don't know what to tell you. And then you keep going, and you get back in another rich area. It's really, really interesting to just drive down 95. You'll hit everything from biggest city in Florida, middle of nowhere, oldest city in Florida, more middle of nowhere, a couple of really cool beach towns that dot it, some really old money, the ghetto,
Florida Panthers.
the Florida Panthers, or Miami. Well, so once you hit past the ghetto, it's basically Miami and South, and all that is just one big, massive stretch of people. Not that I have anything against South Florida. I just feel it's very crowded on the East Coast. A lot of good food. But very crowded on the East Coast. And then you look at the West Coast of Florida, and there's just retirement. You know, you have Tampa and Sarasota, which are both really cool cities that have really cool stuff. Like, Ybor in Tampa is amazing. Clearwater Beach is touristy and well-known. Sarasota has the Ringling Museum and the Certezon, which is a really cool, we'll call it museum, for their winter home. And then you go further south, and it's just like quiet. Venice is beautiful. It's absolutely dead this time of year because that's people's winter homes, usually 55 and up. Further south, you get a little bit more fun in Cape Coral and Fort Myers. Really fun places down but Fort Myers to Naples is, again, that version of the east coast of Miami, just massive people all the way down to Naples. And again, Naples is just old, rich money as well. But my point in saying all that is that you will find pockets of really cool places in Florida in these just massive people. I love Venice. It's a beautiful place to stay. It's got a lot of old history. You'll find some really nice people, some really cool bars, and you never know who you'll run into. And same for Naples. Naples is a very rich town, very quiet town, but it has some really cool places to go and visit. It has a badass coffee. For those of you who've heard this podcast, you know that is my favorite coffee shop in Florida, possibly the world. I love badass coffee. So when we went, I was there every day because I miss that coffee. But it's just another part of Florida. Florida really is its own world. Like, there's that meme where when you're in Florida, it's hot, it's humid, it sucks. But when you leave, it's this magical place of alligators and Disney World and pub subs. And that's the truth. I will complain to my core about Florida. I hate tourists. I hate them. I swear, when people become a tourist in Florida, they lose their mind. It goes out their ass. And they are just the most inconsiderate, rude people in the world. And if you hear about people on the beach acting an idiot, that's not a Floridian. We don't go to the beach in certain times. We know better. And so you get this bad rap thanks to tourists. But when it's not tourist season and it's quiet and the beach is calm and the sand is white and those waves are mellow, it's just the best place to be. And, it's one of the reasons that I do this podcast is to share with you, yes, Florida's overpriced and the prices just keep going up. Yes, it is a tourist nightmare some days. Yes, it is a resident nightmare some days. But when you see that sunset on Naples, on the pier, or you see that sunrise on Ponte Vedra Beach over near Jacksonville, or you're just standing in the middle of the state and you see this absolutely beautiful clouds, for sunrise or sunset, it is just amazing. And you don't want to be anywhere else. You don't want to be anywhere when it's snowing and 6 feet of snow up north and you're standing there in January watching the sunset in shorts going, yeah, all right, I like this. And so that's really another reason I do this podcast, is so that you guys can get a real view of Florida, or find a new place to visit, or find some fun, vacation to go to for the weekend. Go to a new spring, go to a new island, try a new restaurant, find a new place to, actually, I help somebody find a job, find a job, do things like that. It's a fun thing to explore, and it's fun to talk about. I've learned a lot in this past year about Florida. I've learned about places I want to go, I've learned about places I don't want to go. But I have learned a lot. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed this past year. I hope that you've learned something new. I hope that you've learned a new place to visit or a place you never want to go back to. I hope it's given you a new appreciation for the Sunshine State, or, you know, I mean, I've talked to some people who listen to the podcast because they're going to move here eventually. And I think that's great that you guys use me as a resource, because I really do enjoy doing this. And I really still am surprised that people want to listen to me do this. So thank you. I really just wanted to tell you all this to tell you thank you. Thank you for giving me these experiences over the past year. Thank you for giving me topics that I would never have thought of, like the Swanee River. Natalie, I would never have thought of that. I wouldn't even know what that was until it was suggested. The Everglades, someone else suggested that. Yeah, I knew of it, but I didn't realize how cool it was. Thank you for all of my guests who have been on here. From Matthew to Ree and Jamie to Mallory to Alex and Ambrose, Michael, and my future guests. I hopefully have a couple lined up that are going to be fun. But thank you to all these experiences. This is something that without friends and family pushing me, I would never have done. And I really didn't think anybody was going to listen, and then you did. And here we are a year later. I'm still rambling, and hopefully you're still listening. Now, in true fashion, we cannot end that Florida feeling without me telling you of Florida's wildest Florida man. Probably not the wildest, but this is just very interesting. The headline reads, Florida man dressed as Flintstone becomes subdivision celebrity with his custom smart car. Back in November of 2018... the Fred Flintstone, and I won't tell you his real name, drove around Wesley Chapel in a smart car that was customized to look like the iconic Flintmobile. And if you look at it, the man is dressed as Fred Flintstone, and he does look like he's got it looks like an actual smart car. Yeah, it's a smart car. As the Flintmobile. He was unfortunately pulled over, though, for speeding. But not only was he speeding, he decided that he didn't have time to deal with this officer, and he became unruly. He was not arrested. He was detained. He was not arrested. And after further investigation, he was issued a notice to appear and released. But the Flintmobile was confiscated. I can't believe they confiscated it. Sorry, guys. So, I think the best part of this story is the fact that there's a cop sitting in a smart car that looks like a Flintmobile, and the fact that Mr. Flintstone became unruly and had to be detained. Where was Dino to get him out of this? Yeah, I don't know. I guess we're used to hearing of Florida man destroying stuff or being drugged up or something, but this Florida man, I guess he was just stuck in the wrong era and having a little too much fun. So thank you for listening, guys. Thank you for the past year. Thank you for the fun I've gotten to experience. Thank you for the topics. Thank you for listening to me ramble on about St. Augustine and for putting up with me talking about some weird topics. If you guys do have any topics, please just email them to me or reach out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and now TikTok. I really appreciate you guys. I can't say it enough. I'm still working on getting some stickers. Hopefully I'll have those ordered by the end of the summer. I'm still looking into who to use. Any suggestions are welcome. But thank you guys. Thank you for still listening. Thank you for using me as a resource. Thank you for putting up with me. Thank you for listening to my cat scream in the background and all of my guests and interesting topics and weird questions. Thanks for doing the polls and the questions on Instagram and Facebook. You guys are awesome. So, I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. I hope you have a great next week. I apparently just turned off my soundbar. Thanks for putting up with weird things like that in my podcast. Don't forget to wear sunscreen. Don't forget to drink lots of water. Please be nice to one another. And as always, guys, that's your daily dose of sunshine.